Aeons of conflict has caused the rise and fall of many of the astral beings. What will you find in your exploration of the Graveyard of the Gods? This week on Schedule for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I talk with Matthew Hanson of Sneak Attack Press to discuss the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition and Pathfinder 2nd Edition supplement, Graveyard of the Gods. Explore the astral planes and the remnants of long-forgotten gods and those who worship them in this action-packed adventure supplement. We discuss production, collaboration, and community. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I am super excited to be bringing in a fairly seasoned creator who is bringing us a really cool project that might help spice up your D&D 5e games or Pathfinder 2e games. I'm recently getting back into that stuff, as some of you may know. So, Matthew, thank you for joining us on the show this week.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
I was really excited when I saw the art for this. I'd seen you post in other places, kind of promoting the project a little bit before the Kickstarter really started to go live. So I was very excited to be talking to you about this one because it looks really interesting, and I think a lot of people will find this a really cool game to pick up.
Thank you. That's really great to hear. I'm really excited about it, and it's always nice to hear that other people are picking up on that and sharing that excitement too.
I think it's something really unique that's not currently offered by either Paizo or Wizards. So I think that's where my excitement comes in on this one.
Yeah, it is. It's actually funny because it's sort of intended to be used with Spelljammer. Like, we can't legally say that it's used with Spelljammer. But we're on the astral plane, and they kind of do that with Spelljammer. Of course, you don't need to do Spelljammer with it. You can just be exploring out there in the astral sea. But I've heard some people are unhappy a little bit about
I've heard that too.
Spelljammer being a little thin. So if you're in the Spelljammer and you want to thicken it up, it might be a good option. Because they give you that one adventure with it, but then this will give you at least 6 more, maybe more if we hit some stretch goals about dead gods on the astral sea. Who doesn't like that? That's pretty great.
That is something that I'm really excited to kind of hop into, but we're going to get to that in a moment. And before we really dive into Graveyard of the Gods, Matthew, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. I've been playing D&D for 30-some years, 30-plus years. I started when I was a kid with Redbox.
Okay.
Been playing for a while. After college, I started doing a little freelancing. I wrote a couple articles for Dragon Magazine back when that was in print, and did some stuff for Kobold Press and a bunch of other publishers. And then around 2010, decided to start my own game company. Started out just doing a few small adventures, and then I did originally all the writing myself. I used public domain art for the first ones, and then I grew it and started hiring freelancers and doing bigger and bigger projects. And just doing stuff like that. I wrote a game called Magical Kitties Save the Day, which is exactly what it sounds like. And
it's so cute.
Yeah, thanks. That got picked up by Atlas Games, so they put out the 2nd edition, and I still work with them, working on supplements and stuff for that. So that's maybe my biggest achievement in the RPG world. And yeah, when I'm not doing that, I'm a father of 2 kids. One of them's old enough to play Magical Kitties Save the Day, which is pretty amazing. And just having fun hanging out.
Folks, you know you're in good hands with Graveyard of the Gods too, because if I remember correctly, Matthew, isn't Magical Kitties Save the Day a nominated game, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Back in whenever it came out, man, my mind's blanking on what year it was. Yeah, and he nominated for Best Family Game, and I, once upon a time, many years ago, won a silver Emmy for a setting I did for Savage Worlds called Broken Earth, which is a post-apocalyptic setting for that. So
Mm-hmm.
got a couple Emmys in the background there.
You've actually done a bunch of work with publishing and producing games, especially for 5e. Rune Wild comes to mind. I've seen that one float around.
Mm-hmm.
What draws you to putting out content for 5e?
Um, well, I play it, which is one of
Yeah, I
the
guess that
biggest
makes sense.
things. Yeah. Yeah, we've got a gaming group that meets, well, I mean, two gaming groups that have like 50% overlap, and one they meet every other week. So one of
Okay.
them's pretty much straight D&D, and then one is like choose a new system for every setting we're doing. So we just,
Hmm.
with that one wrapped up, Blades in the Dark, and we're going to be starting next week. We have a session 0 for Exalted, so um, do all kinds of different stuff, but also every other week playing D&D, and so like it's natural to do what I'm playing. Plus, it's like the biggest one in town, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of support out there for 5e. And then Pathfinder 2 is another game that have played on the alternate nights, not the D&D night, and
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed that game too. And like the second biggest one in town, so that those go together well, and they're similar enough in system that they're not a challenge to convert from one to the other. Like I love Fate a ton, but going from 5e or Pathfinder to Fate is a lot more work. Same Savage Worlds, I love a ton, and I do put out Savage Worlds stuff, but for this one, I just decided it was going to be too much conversion work, so kept it with those two.
So you just mentioned it there that they're fairly similar. I haven't played a whole lot of Pathfinder 2e myself. I know that it uses a similar, and I'm going to use that term loosely so I don't get ripped apart by the internet system. What goes into making a game that's both, or a setting, I should say, that's both 5e and 2e compatible?
hmm I mean, I feel like setting wise, there's not too much that we need to worry about. Like, I mean, they have that same history,
Mm-hmm.
um, and like, there is an astral plane on both, so it's pretty easy to say, hey, this stuff is happening on the astral plane, and they're like, yeah, we're good with that. Um, it's just mechanics, and like there's a few places where like you need to be a little creative with stuff. It's like little differences are some of the like weirdest things that you don't think about. Like I've got a series called This and That, which like examines like rope and like riffs on rope, and it's got rope monsters and like rope magic items and stuff. And I
Okay.
did one about light sources, and just like there's such like subtle little differences in light sources and dark vision between the games that like I don't think about um just when I'm designing stuff, but then when I have to go back, I'm like, oh yeah, we need to change this a little bit for the conversion. And um like dark vision in 5e is black and white only and not in Pathfinder. And uh so like I have to get rid of that line about black and white. So like big picture stuff, they're very similar. Like, I feel like any adventure you can probably convert from one to another. You just have to be careful about those details.
Yeah,
Because there's those little differences in like how they scale and how like this spell is slightly different from that spell that you just have to keep an eye on.
it's one of those things where it really comes down to minor semantics, but they add up when there's a lot of them built in at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
We've kind of been skirting around it. We've mentioned the name a couple times, but for everybody listening, what is Graveyard of the Gods?
Yes, thank you for asking. So, Graveyard of the Gods is an anthology of adventures, and each one is set on a corpse of a different dead god that is in the astral sea. So, there's a god of war, there's a god of knowledge, um, and like the sort of meta story is that the heroes have a boat that sails around the astral plane, and they find these gods either because they're hired by somebody to, you know, explore, or like something happened, and they need to go solve a problem on this dead god, or they're just exploring and they're like, hey, that looks cool, let's go over there and see what's happening with that. And we're talking about like giant, colossal,
Mm-hmm.
uh, statue looking things, but so huge that they can have cities upon them.
Yeah.
And they go there and they interact with the locals and fight monsters and discover treasure. And like one of the things that really appeals to me about it is that there's sort of, when you're in a more mundane location, like you're in a castle, like there's some things that you can be like, oh, like there's a wizard who used to live here and he did some magic and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you are fairly constrained to sort of what's plausible in a setting like that.
Yeah.
And like out here, you're on a different plane. There's dead gods involved. There's like divine magic seeping all over. So like you can get way more interesting, kind of crazy scenarios. Like, I've got in the one I'm writing, there is a tree that grows prophecies you can pick from, and there's like an Ion Stone mine. That's, they don't come from wizards, they just mine them out of the ground of this dead god, and like gravity works crazy inside the mine, so never can quite be sure which way is up. And then some of the other adventures have other fun, crazy stuff like time moving at a different rate with the players versus all the NPCs on the island. And like magical storms and like plants that just make magical fruit and all kinds of fun stuff. So gives a lot of freedom for that. And we've got a lot of cool adventures that I'm looking forward to. I don't know. I'm looking forward to publishing. I've read them at this point, so I know what goes on in them. But looking
Yeah.
forward to sharing them with the world.
So I got into Dungeons and Dragons in 5th edition. Actually, it wasn't even my first game, but the only reason I was really excited about Spelljammer was because I knew everybody else was excited about Spelljammer. And seeing kind of this coming up, and my guess is that y'all have been working on Graveyard of the Gods for some time. One of my favorite things about how this book is kind of set up is that it's not like a standard A to B to C kind of story. This is something where you can do individual adventures. So I think that's a strong draw for Graveyard of the Gods and implementing it into your games.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think of it a lot like the old school Star Trek, like original series, Next Generation, where it's like, let's go to this planet today and see what kind of hijinks we get up to here, and tomorrow we're going to go to this other planet. And like even within the adventures themselves, like a lot of them are not really story focused. There's a lot of like exploration focus in them. So
Hmm.
like there's this cool looking area over here. Let's go see what we can do with that. Or like there are some different factions, and it's like none are really like the one you need to ally with. So you could like I mean there's one I'm thinking of where like all of the factions are pretty bad, but you can sort of play them against each other and like form temporary alliances and then
Yeah.
betray them. Uh, and then there's another one where like there's a lot more ambiguity in the different factions, so
Hmm.
you can ally with some, but it's not like the upstanding like a lot of adventures, it's like these are the guys who are your allies, these are the bad guys.
Yeah.
But I like, you know, having that gray area, and then that can create different experiences based on how the players wanna play things.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that I really wanted to focus on with these is it's not a plot per se, but it's more a location where lots of plots could potentially happen.
Hmm. And there are a number of wonderful writers who are working on these various adventures, and they're all very unique. Reading through a couple, you have the Junk Racers Adventure by William Fisher, which immediately caught my eye. The idea of building a magical race car out of trash and racing it versus a city that's slowly being crushed because it collided with the hand of a dead god. Like those are very different tones,
Hmm.
but there's a lot to work with there.
I agree, and like I think that that's definitely intentional having that variety of tones because some GMs might gravitate to one, or some groups might gravitate to one or the other. But also,
Hmm.
I feel like when I'm playing, it's nice to switch things up
Oh
periodically.
yeah.
Like, let's have some serious adventures, let's have some sillier adventures. Going back to like Star Trek, like not every episode was, I'm gonna bring out my nerd stuff, but like not every episode is we're gonna be assimilated by the Borg. Sometimes you just need to dress up like Robin Hood and have some silly shenanigans going on. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Matthew, we had mentioned that there's actually a lot of writers on this. I think there's, if I remember correctly, in the base without any of the expansions, I think there's six of you, one for each adventure, right?
there's five. There is one author doing two.
So, how did you get working with these folks and agree on this book? Or is it you reaching out and getting some freelance writers? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's several different processes. First, like William Fisher is actually someone I game with in person, and you
Okay.
mentioned Runewild earlier.
Mm,
Um, so Runewild came about because I was gaming from with William, and that was what we were playing. And I'm like, this is
okay.
awesome. He was GM, and I was a player in that game, and I'm like, this is awesome. And I'm like, I run a publishing company. Would you like to write this up and publish it? And he said yes. And so that we made that happen. And then the other two adventures that he's got are the Junk Racers one and the Dreams of Astral Evil. He also ran Junk Racers and Dreams of Astral Evil were other adventures that he ran for us, and I like those. I'm like, yeah, let's write those up, and I think we've got a neat project here. And then, um, like, I kind of figured Spelljammer was coming out before it was announced, because if you watch the playtests, the Unearthed Arcana playtests,
Yeah.
they tend to sort of have things that are hints. They had all the Spelljammer races in one before they announced Spelljammer proper. So I was thinking of doing something that would work well with Spelljammer and talk to him about that. I came up with an idea for one. William Fisher had actually worked with, I'm worried I'm going to say his name wrong because I've never actually heard him. I only see it in print. But Iran Aviram, who I had known his work from Crystal Heart, which is a webcomic turned Savage World setting. And so I was familiar with him. William had worked with him, so we reached out to him and asked him if he was interested. He said yes. And then the other authors came about because I put out an open call and they submitted and several others submitted, and like there were just too many good ideas to use them all. But I chose a few of my favorites, and yeah, that's how we got those authors. So came from several different directions there.
So there's a lot that goes into finding those folks then when you're really starting to put a book like this together. How big is the base book without any of the Kickstarter goals, roughly, if you had to guess right now?
Yeah, so I'm shooting for 96 pages, which, is about the size of the Pathfinder, the monthly subscription things that they
Yeah.
put out. And then, like, we have those stretch goals, which currently my original hope was that we would be able to make those into a volume 2. We will see if we're able to hit that stretch goal, or if not, we will for sure do any that we get as PDFs and then might be able to fold some into the initial volume 1 book. I'm not going to commit to that, but we will see what we're able to do with that.
Well, as it sits right now, I believe there are 9 additional adventures that might go into that second one. Or is it 6? Am I reading that
I
wrong?
think it is 6. I think I planned
It's
for
6, yes.
6
Okay.
and 6.
I saw Dinosaur Pirates in Space and got very excited. So I think everything just kind of blanked after that.
Yep. I was talking with William Fisher again, and we were brainstorming and like, what don't we have in the books yet? And we're like, space pirates. How did we overlook space pirates? But then they're like, well, we can't just have regular space pirates. Let's make them dinosaur space pirates. And we're like, yes. So that's how we got dinosaur space pirates.
That's so good. Matthew, you've done a number of projects too. You've been making games since about 2010. But what does the writing process look for you when you sit down to make something?
So I usually start with some brainstorming. And like there's like an informal brainstorming first, which is just me hanging out thinking about stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then after I've thought of about it and had some ideas, I start putting some stuff down on paper, and I'm like, yes, I want to have this element and maybe this, and make just lists of stuff. And then I sort of like focus from there. I say like, okay, what are the ones I'm most excited about? And I start writing those, and then sometimes while I'm doing that, I'll have other ideas about, yeah, I should include this. Like for example, I'm started with the adventure that I've got for this book. I'm like, I actually am like, what are some ideas that I haven't used before that I'd like to use? And one of them is this prophecy tree, and then an Ionstone mind. And I'm like, how can I work those together? I'm like, well, yeah, it could be a god of knowledge. Um, and then sort of going from there and like, what are the like elements of those? I brainstormed a list of all the things I thought would be cool with those. I asked some of my friends like what would be cool to put in this, and they gave me some ideas. And then I'm very like non-linear when I'm writing too. So I'll start with the idea that I'm most excited about, um, and it might be at the beginning or the middle or the end, and then I go, okay, yes, and now I'm excited about this part, and I'm excited about this part, and then I'll get to a point where I'm like, okay, I've written about 80%. I need to go ahead and like make sure this all ties together and it has all those connective tissues to it. So at
Hmm.
that point, I start to like really organize it and really make sure I'm checking the boxes of like the intro, the conclusion, the
Yeah,
chapter headings, and stuff like that.
that's so interesting to me because from the other creators that I've talked to, most of them have been pretty, I don't want to say formulaic because they do some incredible work, but you're a lot more freeform than I kind of expected. And it's super interesting. It's just learning these different writing styles. So that's really interesting to me, especially the set piece part there. I I think that's super rad.
Yeah, I've um, found that there's like just so many different ways to approach writing, and what works for some people just doesn't work at all for other people. I'm also in a fiction writing group. Like, I have not published any fiction yet.
Hmm.
That's a goal of mine. We'll see how that goes. Um, but we talk about like planners and pantsers who like writing by the seat of the pants is where that comes from, and how some people do the huge outline and some people just start writing at the beginning and see where it goes. And I find that I'm kind of in the middle of that, where like I like to more or less know where I'm going with it, but
Hmm.
I don't fill in all the blanks and let a lot of them get filled in as I'm progressing with things.
I think that is kind of a good thing for people who listen to the podcast to hear too, because a number of people who do join us for the show are either working on their own projects for the first time or they're interested in something specific. So I think that's always great to hear. Matthew, something I wanted to bring up too was that, and I mentioned it when we first started our conversation that I had to change it. At this point of recording, which just for some reference is on August 25th, Graveyard of the Gods is about 80% funded. Still got 21 days to go. As per release of this episode, it's got a little bit over a week. So I want to ask what the Kickstarter experience has been for you so far.
Yeah, I mean it's been good. Like I'm it's going to fund for sure, I've done
Yeah.
enough of these that I sort of know the pattern that it does, and this one is definitely going to fund. Like, you always want it to fund like day one. That's always the dream with the Kickstarter, and we didn't fund day one, obviously. But I'd say within a week, we're probably going to hit our funding goal. So probably
Yeah.
by the time this hits air, I bet it will be
Almost
funded.
definitely.
And actually, while you were talking, I just refreshed, and we had another backer since our conversation started. So continuing to
Yeah.
make progress.
So even higher than I just said.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, it's been good. It's like you always have the hope of it being like this huge, massive success, which it's
Hmm.
not going to be $1 million Kickstarter. It's going to be in the tens of thousands, though, which is I'm always happy with. And
Yeah.
I think I'm on track to maybe break my backer record, which is
Oh,
500 and something. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think we'll get more backers probably this campaign, which is sort of how I judge the campaigns, because like the size of the project can make different dollar amounts, where like, if I have a really short small book, it's going to raise less than a bigger book.
yeah.
But the number of backers is pretty consistent, so I think we're on
Hmm.
track to have our highest backer for this campaign, which I think is pretty great.
That's super exciting too. And I hope so, because like I said, even just art wise and with the trailer, it looks really exciting and like something that a lot of people will be able to get into really easily. I mean, the first stretch goal is an adventure for level 3 up. I think the lowest in the base book is level 4. Yeah, level 4. So you can drop this into your campaign really early. I mean, you could start with it too, even with new players. Like, I think it's a really solid place for people to have a lot of fun with. Just doing either short form adventures or really diving in deep and exploring some weird astral sea stuff.
Yeah, that is the goal. Give GMs options because, I've found that GMs like to do things differently, and I think there'll be some of all of that. Some people just grab one adventure they like, some might run through them all in a series. Some might just loot the monsters. There's a bunch of new monsters and magic items that we got. So, yeah, I try to make everything that I put out flexible so that, different GMs can use them however they want.
Matthew, a thing that I like to ask friends who are in the Kickstarter sphere is, what is kind of like your dream project to eventually get up on Kickstarter? Is there something you have specifically, or have you kind of already been doing that whenever something new comes out?
Yeah, I mean, like every project I've done is something I've been really excited about. Like, I do have a secret project that I've been writing over the course of the years that I don't think I'm ready to spill the beans about yet.
Oh,
I might maybe come back someday and spill the beans
I would
about
love
that. So, like,
that.
that might be my dream project, but I don't want to quite tell everybody what it is yet.
Well, you heard it.
Um,
That's super exciting, and obviously we'd love to have you back to talk about that later down the road. You heard it first here, audience. We're gonna try and get that out of Matthew down the road. Matthew, we've been talking for a little bit now, and something else that I think that people who have missed out on previous Kickstarters can actually really enjoy about Sneak Attacks is the fact that you have offered a Kickstarter catch-up. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is for people who may not be familiar?
yeah. So basically, what it is if you missed a Kickstarter in the past, we have the main rewards from several of our most recent Kickstarters as add-ons that you can do. So, like you mentioned, the Rune Wilds already, which for those of you who don't know, it's a big hex crawl in this kind of creepy forest where there's like witches and fae and talking animals and all kinds of shenanigans go down there. Um, we've got one called Terrain Toolbox, which is paired with alternate objectives. They're two different books, but they came from the same Kickstarter, and they are about adding more to your encounters. So one's about terrain, and one is about like different win conditions, not just killing everybody, but you have to steal a MacGuffin before the bad guys do, or like protect this NPC. Um, and then some adventures and the this and that series, which I mentioned before, with the rope and the light sources and stuff. And it's just a way that you can get those things if you missed them before. And like, this is Kickstarter only pretty recently-ish started doing add-ons, which I think is a nice feature. Used to be everything had to be a pledge level, and like, I couldn't do a pledge level with like each of these individually, that would just be too cumbersome, but having them
Yeah.
as add-ons makes it a lot easier. And so this is the first time I've done a campaign with add-ons like that, and I think it's been really well because a number of people have gotten them, and it helps boost that total a little bit and gets us closer to the goal. And then, you can pick up something that looks cool, and those will be all the add-ons will be going out right away at the end of the campaign, so you won't have to wait for us to finish the Graveyard of the Gods book. You'll get those a lot sooner. Yeah, and I think it's just a win-win for creators and for the audience both.
It's honestly a great way for people to catch up on creators that they've recently discovered and are wanting to get more of what they offer.
Yeah, for sure.
Matthew, we're starting to run a little bit low on time here, but I got two more questions for you. One is super short, but one can be a little bit more complex there. So, hope you don't mind me asking, but what advice can you give to creators who are looking to create their own projects, but they may not know where to start?
Yeah. I would start by looking at things you love and sort of thinking about how they are done. Um, Sort of analyzing them, taking apart, like, what is this adventure that I really like? Why do I like it? What do the authors do for that? And then, like, I started by freelancing to help me get an idea of, what worked well and what didn't, and got some great advice from some of the early publishers that I worked with there.
Yeah.
And then, like, there's just so many tools these days to make things easier. I started doing PDFs with Drive Through R. No, it wasn't Drive Through RPG back then. It was RPG Now. That shows, for those of you who know those things, shows the shows the age of how long I've been doing this. And like GM's Guild, like, I don't use it for various business reasons, but the thing that I think it is really good for is people just starting out, because there's so much, like, templates there. They've got the old stock art that you can use in yours, and they've just got a lot of tools built in there that make, like, all of the stuff beyond the writing really easy, which for me, that was definitely the hardest part at first, was the layout and the art and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, and they've got so many tools out there these days to make all of that easy. So the last thing is just, like, keep going, don't give up. Persistence will get you there eventually, and, like, you might have to struggle with this part or that part, but you can go online, you can Google it, you can go to various Discord communities, get advice. The website, RPGNet, has a great forum where there's a section there where you can ask for advice, and yeah, just keep going, and you'll be able to succeed.
I think that's fantastic advice, especially with how open the community is really to helping new creators. So, utilizing your resources and really making sure that you don't stop are hugely important.
Yeah, yeah,
Matthew, final question of the night. Where can people find out more about you and Graveyard of the Gods?
yeah. So Graveyards of the Gods is on Kickstarter. If you um, are looking for it, probably just easiest to type in Graveyard of the Gods in the search thing there rather than me spelling it out. But if you have link notes, we can put it in the link note probably. Or what are they called?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
The description.
Yeah, the description. Thank you. Um, I am on Twitter at Sneak Attack Press with one S, because that is the character limit for usernames on
I
Twitter.
understand that.
Yep. And like I'm kind of on Facebook, but not as much as Twitter. And I do have a website, sneakattackpress.com, that I don't update as much as I should. Um, so Twitter tends to be the most up to date thing that I do. Yeah, there's a lot for RPG publishing, and managing a website is not my 100% strong suit.
It's lower on
But
the
writing
priority.
and putting out books is. So there you go.
As always, audience, those links are going to be down in the description below. Matthew, thank you so much for joining me on the show this week. It's been absolutely stellar. Like I said, I recently got back into playing 5e, so getting to talk about it a little bit has been something that's really exciting for me too.
Yeah, it has been a blast talking to you, and glad to have you back doing 5th edition. It's fun, and I am the anti-gatekeeper. I want everybody to come in and everybody to play, so good to have you here.
And audience, thank you so much for joining us this week. Matthew and Graveyard of the Gods, they're scheduled to launch really soon, so go on to Kickstarter and support them. Pick up this fantastic book, even if you just want to look at the art or one or two of the adventures, because it's great. The PDF prices are incredibly reasonable. I didn't even get to talk about that. They're so fairly priced. Just, come and support this game and go and support Michael, Matthew, and the other wonderful writers of Graveyard of the Gods, because it's going to be a great time. Once again, Matthew, thank you so much for joining me. Audience, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you all really soon. Until then, though, take care of yourselves, have a great night, I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Thank you so much to Matthew for joining me on the show this week. It was a lot of fun, and I really learned a lot about this really cool supplement. If you're listening to this on release, then you have 9 days left to go back Graveyard of the Gods. So that ends on September 15th of 2022. And be aware that it's already surpassed its goal, so you don't have to worry about the project's not coming to fruition. Check it out and see if there's any adventures that are right for you and your table. I'm sure Matthew and the rest of the writers will be thrilled to have you. And as always, audience, thank you so much for listening. I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank all of you who joined us on the various charity streams and donated. It really is appreciated and does make quite a big difference. Due to some technical difficulties, Pokemon The Maple League on Live from the Apocalypse is going to be going for an extra week, and you can catch the official second episode tomorrow, Wednesday, September 7th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to be fighting one of the regional legendaries and a specific corporate coffee chain. So, if you like Pokemon and joking about Canada, then join us and have a great time along with this story that we're doing, because it's been really funny and I've enjoyed every moment of it. That's everything from me this week, though, so take care of yourselves and I'll chat with you all real soon. Bye!